Judge tried to humiliate a black teen, not knowing who she really was. The courtroom was unusually crowded that morning, the air filled with murmurs as people waited for the next case to be called. When a young black teen stepped forward, most eyes in the room turned toward her, some curious, others skeptical. She was calm, standing with quiet dignity, her posture straight but her expression humble. To many, she looked out of place, far too young to be standing before the bench. The judge adjusted her glasses, peered down, and smirked in a tone meant to cut deep. She said mockingly, "Do you even know where you are? This is a courtroom, not a classroom." Laughter rippled through the audience, feeding off the judge's condescension. The teen lowered her gaze, not in shame, but in patience. She knew something the others didn't, and she was waiting for the right moment. The judge leaned forward, trying to reinforce her authority, her voice heavy with sarcasm as she said, "People come here with serious matters. You can't just stroll in and waste our time." The teen held a folder tightly against her chest, her knuckles pressed white from the grip. Around her, whispers grew, painting her as an intruder, someone lost in the wrong place. Yet, despite the pressure of hundreds of eyes and the humiliation of being mocked publicly, her expression did not break. Inside, there was a fire, a confidence she refused to reveal until she absolutely had to. The judge finally asked for her name, with a mocking smile as if expecting to expose her ignorance once more. But when the teen answered, her voice rang, steady, clear, and commanding enough to cut through the snickers in the room. For the first time that morning, silence fell. The judge blinked, slightly unsettled, and shifted in her chair. The teen's introduction revealed something no one had anticipated. She wasn't a defendant, she wasn't a random visitor, and she wasn't lost. She was a law prodigy, the youngest law student in the state, already serving under a seasoned attorney. She wasn't there to be judged, she was there to help defend someone else, and she had been called in because of her brilliance. The courtroom buzzed with disbelief. People glanced at one another, murmurs turning from ridicule to awe. The judge's smirk slowly drained from her face, replaced by confusion and perhaps even shame. The same girl she tried to belittle in front of everyone was someone with knowledge beyond her years, someone who had already achieved what most could not even dream of. Then, as the teen opened her folder, the atmosphere shifted completely. She spoke with calm authority, quoting case laws, legal precedents, and statutes with precision and clarity. Her words carried weight, every line dismantling the opposition's claims and leaving the courtroom frozen in attention. The judge, who had spent the first few minutes mocking her, now sat speechless, forced to listen as the teen laid out arguments with flawless logic and undeniable command of the law. The audience, once entertained by her humiliation, now stared in admiration. By the end of her presentation, the room was silent, not out of judgment, but respect. The girl had turned ridicule into reverence, proving that age and appearance mean nothing when true brilliance speaks. That day, the judge learned a lesson she would never forget, and everyone who witnessed it left knowing they had seen history in the making. The courtroom was filled with people who had come expecting a normal day of hearings, but what unfolded was anything but ordinary. When the young black teen stepped forward, her presence immediately drew whispers and sideways glances. She looked too young to be standing there with such seriousness, and to many she appeared misplaced, like a child, who had wandered into the wrong world. The judge looked down at her, smirk tugging at her lips, and in a mocking tone said, "Do you even know where you are? This is a courtroom, not a classroom." The remark was met with laughter from some in the audience, the sound echoing like a cruel chorus. But the girl didn't flinch. She lowered her head slightly, not from shame, but from patience, as if she was carefully choosing the exact moment to reveal who she really was. The judge, enjoying the power of the moment, pressed further. "People come here with real problems," she said sharply, her words meant to humiliate. "You can't just stroll in here and waste the court's time." The room grew louder with whispers, mocking voices labeling the girl as lost, unprepared, or irrelevant. She stood there silently, holding a simple folder to her chest like a shield, her hands steady, her eyes burning with quiet determination. She looked fragile on the outside, but there was a strength hidden just beneath her calm surface, a strength that not even the judge could sense. Finally, when the judge leaned forward with a smirk and demanded to know her name, the girl lifted her head. Her voice, steady and clear, rang through the room and silenced every whisper at once. In that single moment, the atmosphere shifted. The judge blinked, her confidence flickering, because the name she heard carried weight. The girl was not some random teen who had walked into the wrong place. She was a prodigy, the youngest law student in the state, already apprenticed under one of the most respected attorneys in the region. She was not there to be ridiculed, nor to stand trial. She was there to defend someone else, her presence requested precisely because of her brilliance and skill. The realization spread across the courtroom like fire. Murmurs turned from laughter to disbelief. Those who had mocked her moments before now sat frozen in their seats. The judge's smirk melted into discomfort as she began to understand the gravity of her mistake. The girl opened her folder, her movements calm and deliberate, and when she began to speak, her words flowed like steel wrapped in silk. She quoted, case law after case law, each one precise, undeniable, and sharper than any weapon. Every point she made dismantled the opposing arguments piece by piece, and the courtroom that had once mocked her now listened in awe. The judge, who only minutes ago had tried to humiliate her, sat in silence, forced to recognize the depth of this teenager's knowledge and composure. By the time the girl closed her folder, the room was filled with a different kind of silence, one born from respect and humility. What began as public humiliation ended as a historic lesson. Greatness cannot be measured by age or appearance, and dignity always shines brightest when tested. The courtroom was alive with the usual energy of chatter and murmurs, people waiting for their cases, lawyers flipping through papers, and the judge seated high with the air of authority that seemed untouchable. When the young black teen stepped forward, the room stilled for a moment, not out of respect but disbelief. She looked far too young, her face carrying the innocence of youth, her hands clutching a folder to her chest. Some spectators exchanged glances, smirks spreading as though this was a mistake waiting to happen. The judge leaned forward, eyes narrowing, and in a tone that was sharp enough to sting, said, "Do you even know where you are? This is a courtroom, not a classroom." Laughter rippled across the room, a wave of ridicule that echoed against the walls. But the teen did not falter. She lowered her gaze slightly, calm in her silence, her composure unshaken. She was waiting, not shrinking. The judge, savoring the reaction, pressed harder. Her voice carried arrogance as she declared, "This is not a place for games, young lady. People here come with real problems, not childish distractions." The audience, feeding off the judge's tone, whispered and chuckled among themselves. To them, the girl seemed out of her depth, someone who had wandered into a world far too heavy for her young shoulders. But if they had looked closely, they would have noticed the fire flickering in her eyes, a determination that refused to be extinguished. She held her folder tightly, every second of silence building toward something they could not yet see. When the judge finally demanded her name, leaning back with a smirk of superiority, the teen lifted her head and spoke with a voice that cut through the noise like a blade. It was clear, steady, and powerful enough to make the room freeze. Oh, that instant, everything changed. The judge blinked, her expression faltering as the weight of the girl's name struck. The whispers ceased, the laughter died, and all eyes locked on her with growing realization. She was not a lost child, nor someone in trouble. She was a prodigy, the youngest law student in the state, already working under the mentorship of one of the most respected attorneys in the region. She had been called not as a defendant, but as a defender, summoned for her sharp mind and brilliant understanding of the law. The courtroom, once alive with ridicule, now buzzed with stunned silence. The judge, who only moments ago mocked her, felt the shift like a tidal wave crashing against her authority. The teen opened her folder with calm hands, each page filled with notes and references that reflected the depth of her preparation. As she began to speak, her words carried the weight of wisdom far beyond her years. She cited statutes, quoted precedents, and dismantled arguments with flawless precision. The courtroom listened, spellbound, as she commanded the space with brilliance no one could deny. The judge, once eager to humiliate, now sat motionless, caught in the humiliation of her own arrogance. By the time the teen closed her folder, the room was silent, but no longer out of mockery. It was respect, reverence, and awe. The girl had transformed ridicule into triumph, teaching everyone present that greatness is not bound by age or appearance, but by courage, knowledge, and the unshakable strength of character. The young girl stood at the center of the courtroom, her small frame holding a presence far larger than anyone had expected. With slow, deliberate movements, she opened the folder she had been clutching to her chest, the soft sound of paper shifting, cutting through the tense silence. For the first time, the judge who had mocked her leaned forward, not with arrogance but with curiosity, a faint trace of unease visible in her eyes. The girl's voice, when it rang out, was calm and unwavering. She began to recite statutes, case laws, and precedents with flawless precision, each reference landing like a hammer striking against the walls of prejudice that had been built around her. Every word she spoke was measured and sharp, carrying the weight of knowledge that no one in the room had expected from someone so young. The laughter and smirks that had once filled the courtroom had vanished, replaced by stillness, as though the entire room had forgotten to breathe. Her arguments flowed seamlessly, weaving logic and law into a tapestry that no opposing voice could unravel. She pointed to sections of established cases, quoted rulings that even seasoned lawyers often overlooked, and connected them with clarity so striking that the courtroom hung on her every word. The judge, once eager to humiliate her, now sat frozen, lips pressed tightly together as if she feared that speaking might expose her own ignorance. The spectators, who had mocked moments earlier, now leaned forward in their seats, their eyes wide with something between shock and admiration. The girl did not raise her voice, she did not shout, but the power in her tone was undeniable. She spoke like someone who belonged, like someone who had carried this knowledge within her bones her whole life. As her presentation continued, the dynamic of the courtroom shifted entirely. The same walls that had echoed with laughter now absorbed the sound of silence, a silence heavy with respect. The girl turned page after page of her notes, but her confidence was not in the paper. It was in her mind, her preparation, and the unshakable truth that she knew exactly what she was doing. Every sentence she delivered struck directly at the heart of the case, dismantling the prosecution's arguments piece by piece until there was nothing left standing against her logic. By the time she reached her conclusion, her voice carried not only authority, but something greater, the quiet pride of someone who had risen above humiliation and turned it into triumph. When she finally closed her folder, the sound echoed like a gavel, striking, final, and absolute. The judge remained silent, unable to summon a reply, her earlier smirk gone, her authority diminished by the brilliance of the very girl she had tried to belittle. The audience did not clap, but their silence spoke louder than applause. It was the kind of silence born of awe, the kind that comes only when people know they are witnessing something unforgettable. The girl had not only defended a case, she had defended her dignity, her worth, and her place in the world. In doing so, she shattered the stereotypes that had been placed on her shoulders and left the courtroom transformed. Everyone who walked out that day carried with them the memory of the young teen who had turned judgment into respect, proving once and for all that greatness is not bound by age, race, or appearance, but by courage, brilliance, and the strength to rise when others expect you to fall.